The stars were dying. At least, that was how it felt to Ambassador Tella as she stood before the great window of her ship and watched another colony world burn. The planet below had been called Varth 3. It had been home to 2 million Velhari, people, farmers, teachers, children. Now it was nothing but fire and smoke. The Drekari had come 3 days ago. Their black ships had filled the sky like a swarm of hungry insects. They did not ask for surrender. They did not offer terms. They simply began killing. Tella closed her 4 eyes and tried not to remember the screams she had heard over the communication channels before they went silent. She was old for a Velhari. Her blue skin had faded to pale gray over the centuries. She had seen many terrible things in her long life. But nothing like this. Nothing like the Drekari Empire. Behind her, a young aide named Morix entered the room. His hands were shaking as he held out a datapad. "Ambassador, the Council has made their decision." Tella did not turn around. "And what have they decided?" "They want to send a message. To the new species. The ones we discovered last year." Now Tella turned. Her old eyes studied the young aide carefully. "The humans? We know almost nothing about them. We have only observed them from a distance. The Council believes they may help us. Their world seems peaceful. They have many different nations that work together. Perhaps they could serve as mediators, peacekeepers." Tella let out a long, tired breath. The Velhari Confederation had always believed in peace. For 10,000 years, they had built their society on cooperation and understanding. They did not have warriors. They had philosophers. They did not have weapons. They had art, and now they were dying because of it. "Send the message," she said quietly. "Tell them we need help. Tell them we are willing to pay any price. Tell them." She paused and looked back at the burning world below. "Tell them we are desperate." The message traveled across the stars at the speed of light. It passed through the vast emptiness between galaxies. It bounced off relay stations that the Velhari had built centuries ago. And finally, after traveling 3,000 light years, it reached a small blue planet called Earth. Captain Park Do-yoon was eating his breakfast when the call came. He was a tall man with a hard face and gray hair that had once been black. At 52 years old, he had spent more than 30 years in the United Nations Space Command. He had fought in the unification wars that had brought Earth's nations together under one government. He had lost friends. He had lost family. He had learned, through blood and fire, what happened when good people did nothing while evil spread. His second-in-command, Commander Yoon Jeon, found him in the mess hall of the battleship Indomitable. She was younger than him, but not by much. Her black hair was pulled back tight, and her eyes were serious. "Sir, you need to see this." Do-yoon followed her to the command center. Around them, the great ship hummed with power. The Indomitable was the flagship of the Third Deep Space Fleet. It was 2 kilometers long and carried enough weapons to destroy a small moon. The humans had built it not for conquest, but for protection. They remembered too well what it felt like to be helpless. On the main screen, the message from the Velhari played. A blue-skinned alien with 4 eyes spoke in a soft, frightened voice. Behind her, Do-hyun could see fires burning. "Please," the alien said, "we do not know you. We have only watched you from far away. But we have seen that your people believe in working together. We believe in peace too. But the Drekari do not believe in peace. They believe only in death. 3 of our worlds have already fallen. Millions of our people are gone. We are not warriors. We cannot fight back. Please, send someone to help us find a peaceful solution. Send peacekeepers. We will give you anything. We will do anything. Just please. Help us." The message ended. The command center was silent. Commander Yoon looked at her captain. Sir, what do you want to do? This is beyond our authority. We should contact Earth Command and wait for instructions. Do-hyun did not answer. He was staring at the screen where the message had played. He was thinking about a day long ago when he was a young soldier. His hometown had been burning then, too. Enemy forces had surrounded it. He had called for help on the radio again and again. But help had taken too long to arrive. By the time the reinforcements came, everyone he loved was gone. How far away is the Velhari Confederation? He asked. 3,000 light years. With slip space travel, we could reach them in approximately 6 days. How many ships do we have in the Third Fleet? Commander Yoon checked her datapad. 12 battleships, 40 cruisers, 200 support vessels, full combat readiness. Do-hyun nodded slowly. He walked to the main communication panel and opened a channel to every ship in the fleet. This is Captain Park Do-hyun to all vessels of the 3rd Deep Space Fleet. I have just received a distress call from an alien civilization called the Velhari. They are under attack by a hostile empire. They have asked for peacekeepers. He paused. I am not sending peacekeepers. I am taking the entire fleet. We leave in 6 hours. Any captain who does not wish to join this mission may remain behind without penalty. But I will not stand by while innocent people die. We have all seen what happens when the strong prey on the weak and no one stops them. Not again. Never again. He closed the channel and turned to Commander Yoon. Her face showed surprise, but also something else. Something like pride. Sir, Earth Command will not be happy about this. They can. Court-martial me when we get back. You are asking the entire fleet to follow you on an unauthorized mission. To save aliens we have never met. Yes. We might be flying into a war we cannot win. Yes, Commander. Yoon was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. I will begin preparations for departure, Captain. 4 hours later, every single ship in the 3rd Deep Space Fleet reported ready for travel. Not one captain had chosen to stay behind. As the fleet prepared to enter slip space, Lieutenant Kan Junji approached the captain with a tactical analysis. She was young and brilliant, and her mind worked faster than most computers. Sir, I have been studying the information from the Velhari message. The Drikari Empire appears to be a militaristic civilization with at least 50 times more ships than the Velhari possess. They have never lost a war in recorded history. Do-hyun looked at the young lieutenant. And what do you think of our chances? Lieutenant Kang did not hesitate. I think the Drikari have never fought humans before, sir. For the first time in days, Captain Park Do-hyun smiled. 6 hours after receiving the distress call, the 3rd Deep Space Fleet vanished into slip space. 252 warships, carrying 50,000 soldiers, sailors, and marines. They were not peacekeepers. They were not diplomats. They were warriors who had learned, through centuries of hard lessons, that peace was not given freely. Peace had to be won. Peace had to be protected. And sometimes, peace had to be taken by force from those who would destroy it. The Velhari had asked for help. Humanity answered. Ambassador Tella had prepared a small welcome ceremony at Station Orient 4. It was one of the last safe places in Velhari space. The station floated in orbit around a peaceful gas giant, far from the front lines where the Drikari were still advancing. She expected 3 ships. Maybe 4. A diplomatic vessel, perhaps a couple of small escorts. That was what peacekeepers looked like. That was what civilized beings sent when they answered a call for help. Around her, the station's observation deck was quiet. A few dozen Velhari officials stood in their finest robes. They had prepared speeches of gratitude. They had rehearsed proper greetings for this new species. Morix, her young aide, stood beside her with a translation device in his hands. "The human ship should arrive any moment," Morix said. He sounded nervous. "Our sensors are detecting unusual readings from the slipspace exit point." Tella nodded calmly. Inside, she felt anything but calm. She was placing all her hopes on complete strangers. What if the humans refused to help? What if they were too weak to make a difference? What if they wanted payment that the Velhari could not afford? The first ship emerged from slip-space. It was not a diplomatic vessel. It was a monster of black metal and blazing engines. Its hull was covered in what looked like weapons. Rows and rows of weapons. Things that looked like cannons. Things that looked like missile launchers. Things that Tella could not even identify. The ship was enormous. It dwarfed the entire station. It dwarfed anything the Velhari had ever built. Morix made a small sound of fear. The translation device fell from his hands and clattered on the floor. Then the second ship emerged. Just as big. Just as terrifying. Then the third. The fourth. The fifth. They kept coming. Tella stood frozen as ship after ship after ship appeared in the void. Battleships the size of cities. Cruisers bristling with weapons. Support vessels that moved in perfect formation like predators hunting together. The sky outside the observation window, filled with human warships until there was barely any empty space left. When it finally stopped. Station Ornth 4 was completely surrounded by 252 vessels of war. "By the ancient stars," whispered an old Velhari counselor behind Tella. "What have we invited into our home?" A communication signal came through. A human voice, translated by the station's computer, spoke in calm and polite words. "Station Ornth 4, this is Captain Park Do-hyun of the United Nations Space Command vessel Indomitable. We have received your distress call and have come to offer assistance. Requesting permission to dock and meet with your leadership." Tella's hands were shaking, but her voice remained steady. "Permission granted, Captain. We welcome you." 2 hours later, Captain Park Do-hyun walked through the corridors of Station Ornth 4. He had brought only a small group with him. Commander Yoon Ji-yeon walked at his right side. Lieutenant Kang Yoon-ji walked at his left, carrying a datapad and already studying everything around her with sharp eyes. Behind them walked Sergeant Major Baek Soo-jin. She was not tall, but she moved like someone who had seen many fights and won all of them. Her uniform was different from the others. It had more armor, more weapons. She was a Marine, trained for close combat, and she scanned every shadow and doorway as they walked. The Velhari watched them pass with wide eyes. These humans looked so strange to them. 2 eyes instead of 4. Skin in shades of brown and tan. Bodies that seemed small compared to most species, but moved with a confidence that was almost frightening. Ambassador Tella met them in the main council chamber. 50 Velhari officials sat around a curved table, all of them staring at the newcomers with a mix of hope and fear. Tella stood and bowed in the traditional Velhari greeting. "Captain Do-hyun, on behalf of the Velhari Confederation, I thank you for answering our call. We did not expect such a generous response." Do-hyun returned the bow with a slight nod of his head. "Ambassador, we received your message and came as quickly as we could. Please, tell us everything about your situation." For the next hour, Tella spoke. She told him about the Drekari Empire, how it had appeared from the outer reaches of the galaxy 200 years ago, how it had conquered species after species, taking their worlds, enslaving their people, and stripping their planets of resources. How the Drekari had no interest in negotiation or coexistence. How they believed that the strong should rule and the weak should serve or die. She told them about the Velhari Confederation and its 7-member species. How they had built their society on peace and cooperation. How they had no real military because they had never needed one. How they had tried to reason with the Drekari and been laughed at. How they had tried to flee and been hunted down. How they had tried to surrender and been enslaved anyway. By the time she finished, tears were falling from her 4 eyes. We have lost 3 colony worlds. 20 million of our people are dead or captured. Our remaining worlds are defended by ships that were built for exploration, not war. We cannot fight back. We can only run, and there is nowhere left to run to. She looked at Do-Yun with desperate hope. Please, Captain, we do not ask you to fight our war. We only ask that you help us find a way to negotiate. Perhaps if the Drekari see that we have powerful friends, they will agree to terms that let some of us survive. Captain Do-Yun had listened in silence. Now he leaned forward slightly. Ambassador, you asked us to send peacekeepers. You asked us to help you negotiate. Surrender. Yes. I need you to understand. Something about humans. His voice was calm but hard, as iron. We did not cross 3,000 light years to negotiate your surrender. We came to win your war. The council chamber erupted in confused murmurs. The Valhari officials looked at each other in shock. Win the war? Tella repeated. Captain, you do not understand. The Drekari have thousands of ships. They have conquered dozens of species. No one has ever defeated them. Do-Hin turned to Lieutenant Kang Yoonji. Lieutenant, please show our hosts what we have prepared. Yoonji stepped forward and activated her datapad. A holographic display appeared above the council table. It showed star maps, fleet movements, supply lines, and tactical analyses. Ambassador, Yoonji said, we have been studying the Drekari since we received your message 6 days ago. We have analyzed their military patterns, identified their weaknesses, and calculated their probable strategies. We have a plan to stop them. She pointed to various locations on a map as she spoke. The Drekari fleet is spread thin across multiple conquests. Their supply lines are extended and vulnerable. Their command structure is rigid and slow to adapt. And most importantly, they have become arrogant. They do not expect real resistance because they have never faced it. Commander Yoon stepped forward. We brought enough firepower to change that. Our ships carry weapons that can punch through any armor the Drekari possess. Our soldiers are trained in every form of combat. We are not explorers or traders. We are warriors. Tella stared at them. She did not know what to say. For a long moment, she simply stood there, trying to process what she was hearing. Why? She finally asked. Why would you do this? You do not know us. We have nothing to offer you. Why would you come so far and risk so much for strangers? Captain Do-Hyun was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before. 200 years ago, my world was torn apart by war. Nation fought nation. Millions died. Cities burned. And do you know what I learned from that time? He looked into Tella's 4 eyes. I learned that evil wins when good people do nothing. I learned that the strong must protect the weak, or the strong become no better than the monsters they fight. And I learned that no one should ever have to face darkness alone. He stood straight and tall. You sent a message into the void, asking for help. We heard you. We came. It is as simple as that. Tella felt more tears falling. But these were different. These were tears of hope. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. Do nodded. Then his expression hardened again. Now, Ambassador, let us discuss how we are going to destroy the Drekari Empire. Outside the station, the human battleships hung in the void like sleeping giants. They had crossed the stars not as diplomats or mediators, but as protectors, as avengers, as the fist of a species that had learned, through its own long history of suffering, that peace was precious and worth fighting for. The Valhari had expected peacekeepers, They had received something far more powerful. They had received humanity. Commander Vrex of the Dracori Empire stood on the bridge of his flagship and smiled. The smile showed rows of sharp teeth in a face that looked like it was made of gray stone and cruelty. He was tall, even for a Dracori. His scales were dark as night, and his eyes glowed with a hungry red light. Before him, through the great viewing window, the planet Tassar Prime turned slowly in space. It was a beautiful world. Blue oceans, green forests, cities that sparkled like jewels along the coastlines. 4 million Velhari lived down there. 4 million soft, weak creatures who had never known real war. Rex was going to change that. "Commander," his sensor officer reported, "our fleet has arrived in formation. 400 ships ready for assault. 400 warships." It was more than enough to crush a planet that had no real defenses. The Velhari had sent a few pathetic ships to protect Tassar Prime. Exploration vessels with small weapons attached. They would burn in minutes. "Begin the attack," Rex ordered. "Leave nothing standing." The Dracori fleet began to move. Hundreds of black ships, shaped like daggers, advanced toward the planet. In their weapons bays, missiles waited to launch. In their landing ships, soldiers waited to invade. The Dracori had done this many times before. They knew exactly how it would go. The Velhari would panic. They would beg. They would surrender. And then the Dracori would take everything they wanted. "Commander!" The sensor officer's voice was suddenly sharp with confusion. "I am detecting unknown vessels in orbit around the planet. Large vessels. Very large." Rex frowned. "Show me." The main screen changed to show the orbital space above Tassar Prime. What Rex saw made him freeze. There were ships there. But they were not Velhari ships. They were massive. They were covered in weapons. And there were dozens of them, positioned in a defensive formation around the planet like guardians protecting their home. "What is that?" Rex demanded. "Those are not Velhari designs. I have never seen anything like them. Unknown, Commander. They are not responding to our identification requests." One of the strange ships moved forward from the formation. It was enormous, easily twice the size of Rex's flagship. Its hull was dark gray with markings in a language Rex did not recognize. Weapons that looked like massive cannons lined its sides. A communication signal came through. A voice spoke in heavily accented Dracori language. "Dracori Fleet. This is Admiral Chominje of the United Nations Space. Command Vessel Hammer of Dawn. You are ordered to withdraw from this system immediately. This is your only warning. Leave now or face destruction." For a moment, the bridge was silent. Then Rex began to laugh. The laugh was deep and cruel, and it echoed through the command center. "Unknown species," he said. "You dare to threaten the Dracori Empire? We have conquered 100 worlds. We have crushed 1,000 armies. Do you think a few strange ships will frighten us?" He leaned toward the communication panel. "I am Commander Vrex of the 7th Conquest Fleet. I do not accept orders from lesser beings. Attack formation." The 400 Dracori ships surged forward. The battle began. Admiral Chominje stood on the bridge of the Hammer of Dawn and watched the Dracori fleet approach. He was a calm man with gray in his hair and ice in his eyes. He had fought in 3 wars and buried too many friends. He did not want to kill anyone today, but he would not hesitate to do what was necessary. "All ships," he said quietly, "weapons free. Protect Tassar Prime at all costs." The first Dracori missiles launched. Hundreds of them, streaking toward the human fleet like angry fireflies. The Dracori expected them to hit. They expected explosions and damage and death. They were wrong. The human ships activated their point defense systems. Thousands of small guns opened fire, filling the space around the fleet with a wall of projectiles. The Dreckery missiles flew into that wall and vanished. Every single one, destroyed before they could reach their targets. Commander Vrex stared at his tactical display in disbelief. That is impossible. Launch another barrage. More missiles. Same result. The human ships simply shot them all down, like swatting insects from the air. And then the humans fired back. The Hammer of Dawn's main railguns activated. They did not fire missiles or energy beams. They fired solid tungsten rounds at 40% of the speed of light. At that velocity, a piece of metal the size of a human fist carried more energy than a nuclear bomb. The first round hit a Dreckery cruiser. It did not explode. It simply passed through the ship like it was not even there, leaving a hole the size of a house. The cruiser's reactor lost containment. The ship vanished in a ball of fire. What was that? Vrex shouted. What kind of weapon was that? Before anyone could answer, more railgun rounds slammed into his fleet. Ships died one after another. 2, 5, 10, 20. The Dreckery had never seen anything like this. Their shields, which had stopped every weapon they had ever faced, meant nothing to these projectiles. The rounds were too fast, too powerful. They punched through shields and armor like paper. The human cruisers joined the attack. They launched missiles of their own, smart weapons that dodged and weaved through space, hunting their targets with cold mechanical precision. They fired plasma lances that burned through Dreckery hulls like cutting torches through ice. And then the Marines arrived. Sergeant Major Beak Sujin stood at the head of her boarding team in the launch bay of the Hammer of Dawn. Around her, 50 human Marines in powered combat suits waited for the signal. These were not the soft, peaceful beings the Dreckery had grown used to crushing. These were warriors born and bred, trained from childhood in the art of war. The assault shuttle launched. It crossed the distance to the Dreckery flagship in seconds, dodging fire with practiced ease. The pilot, a young woman named Han Xianmi, flew like she had been born in the void. She brought the shuttle alongside the enemy flagship and matched its movement perfectly. Breaching in 3, Sujin announced. 2, 1. The shuttle's cutting lasers burned through the Dreckery hull. The Marines poured through the gap into the enemy ship. They moved in perfect coordination, their weapons firing with deadly accuracy. Dreckery soldiers came to stop them. The Dreckery were bigger. They were stronger. They had claws and teeth and scales. It did not matter. The humans were faster, more disciplined, better equipped. Their powered suits gave them strength to match any Dreckery. Their training gave them skills that no amount of natural weapons could overcome. Sujin led the charge through the corridors of the enemy flagship. Her rifle barked again and again. Dreckery fell before her. She felt no joy in the killing, but no hesitation either. These creatures had slaughtered millions. They would slaughter millions more if no one stopped them. The Marines reached the bridge in 7 minutes. The door was heavily armored and locked. Sujin simply attached a breaching charge and stepped back. The explosion ripped the door apart. The Marines stormed through. Commander Vrex was waiting for them with a weapon in his clawed hands. He fired at the first Marine through the door. The shot bounced harmlessly off the powered armor. "Surrender," Sujin said, her rifle aimed at his chest. Vrex snarled and charged at her, claws raised to tear her apart. Sujin did not flinch. She fired once, and the Dreckery commander fell. "Bridge secured," she reported calmly into her communicator. Enemy commander neutralized. Outside, the battle was ending. Of the 400 Dreckery ships that had come to conquer Tazar Prime, 17 remained. They were running, fleeing at maximum speed toward the edge of the system. Admiral Cho let them go. Let them carry a message back to their empire, he said. Let them tell their masters what happened here today. The surviving Drekari ships fled through slipspace, carrying their wounded and their fear. They brought footage of the battle to the Drekari High Command. They showed their leaders what human weapons could do. They described the impossible speed, the impossible power, the impossible discipline of these strange new enemies. The Drekari High Council watched the footage in silence. These were beings who had ruled through terror for 3,000 years. They had crushed every species they had ever encountered. They had believed themselves invincible. Now, watching their fleet die in minutes, they felt something they had not felt in millennia: fear. Far away, on Station Orant 4, Ambassador Tella received the news of the battle. She stood in the communication center, listening to the reports, watching the numbers scroll across her screen. 400 enemy ships engaged. 383 destroyed. Enemy flagship captured. Tazara Prime completely untouched. Human casualties, 6 wounded. 0 deaths. She sat down heavily in her chair. Morix stood beside her, his young face pale with shock. "Ambassador?" he whispered. "Are you all right?" Tella did not answer for a long moment. Finally, she looked up at her aide with wonder in her 4 eyes. "They asked for peacekeepers," she said softly. "We sent a message asking for peacekeepers, and the universe sent us this." She did not know whether to laugh or cry. So she did both. The humans had arrived. The war had truly begun. And for the first time in 200 years, the Drekari Empire had learned what it felt like to lose. The Drekari High Command believed the battle at Tessara Prime was a mistake. A bad situation. An unexpected result that would not happen again. Surely, they told themselves, these humans could not sustain such aggression. Surely, they would grow tired. Surely, they would want to negotiate. Every species eventually wanted to negotiate. They were wrong about everything. Captain Park Doyan did not wait for the Drekari to recover. He did not give them time to reinforce their positions. He did not allow them a moment to catch their breath. While the enemy was still reeling from their first defeat, he struck again. The Third Deep Space Fleet divided into 4 strike groups. Admiral Cho Min-jae took the first group and attacked a Drekari supply depot 3 systems away. Commander Yoon Ji-yeon led the second group against a communication relay station that coordinated enemy fleet movements. 2 other captains took their groups and hit shipyards where new Drekari vessels were being built. All 4 attacks happened at the same time. All 4 were successful. In one day, the Drekari lost their ability to resupply their forward fleets. In one day, their communication network was crippled. In one day, 3 shipyards burned in the void, taking hundreds of half-built warships with them. The Drekari High Command screamed for revenge. They sent their reserve fleets to hunt down the humans. But the human ships were never where they expected them to be. Every time the Drekari gathered a force, the humans struck somewhere else. Every time the Drekari defended a target, the humans hit a different one. It was not just strength. It was strategy. It was precision. It was a way of fighting that the Drekari had never encountered before. Chief Engineer Lim Ha-jun worked 18 hours a day in the engineering deck of the Indomitable. He was a small man with oil-stained hands and tired eyes, but his mind was sharper than any computer. Around him, his team crawled through the ship's systems, repairing damage, upgrading weapons, and improving defenses. "Sir," one of his young engineers said, "the railgun cooling systems are operating at 92% efficiency. Should we consider that acceptable?" Ha-jun shook his head. "Acceptable is not good enough. Our people are out there fighting. Every % of efficiency we gain could save a life. Find me 95%. Then find me 98. The humans did not just fight hard. They learned. Every battle taught them something new about the Drekari, their ship designs, their tactical patterns, their weaknesses. And after every battle, Hajun and engineers like him across the fleet used that knowledge to make their ships better. New armor configurations to resist Drekari weapons, better targeting systems to track enemy movements, faster engines to outrun pursuit. The human fleet was evolving, adapting, becoming more dangerous with every passing day. Meanwhile, on the ground, human soldiers were doing something the galaxy had never seen before. Corporal Nem Yuri was a combat medic. She was young, barely 25, with kind eyes that had seen too much suffering. Her unit had been sent to a planet called Dreth 7. It was a world the Drekari had conquered 50 years ago. The original inhabitants, a species called the Morth, had been enslaved ever since. The human Marines landed at dawn. The fighting was brief and brutal. The Drekari garrison, taken by surprise, fell in hours. But what Yuri saw after the battle affected her more than any combat ever could. The labor camps stretched for miles. Rows and rows of crude buildings where the Morith had been forced to work and die. The survivors who emerged from those buildings were thin and broken. Their scales, which should have been bright green, were faded and gray. Their eyes were empty. They had been slaves so long they had forgotten what freedom looked like. Yuri was the first to reach them. She dropped her weapon and knelt beside an old Morith woman who had collapsed at the camp gates. "It is okay," Yuri said softly, even though she knew the translator might not convey the right feeling. "You are safe now. We are here to help." The old woman looked at her with confusion and fear. Who are you? What species?" "Human. We are called humans. Why are you here? What do you want from us?" Yuri felt tears forming in her eyes. "Nothing. We want nothing from you. We just want to help." The old woman began to cry. Then others began to cry. Soon the entire camp was filled with the sound of weeping. It was not sad weeping. It was the sound of creatures who had given up all hope suddenly discovering that hope still existed. Over the following days, human medical teams arrived. They treated the sick and wounded. They brought food and clean water. They dismantled the slave collars that the Drekari had placed around every prisoner's neck. Similar scenes played out across a dozen worlds. Wherever the humans went, they did not just defeat the Drekari. They freed the enslaved. Species that the rest of the galaxy had assumed were extinct emerged from labor camps and prison worlds. The Morth, the Falani, the Dross, dozens of peoples who had suffered under Drekari rule for centuries, and every single one of them, when they learned that they owed their freedom to these strange two-eyed creatures from a distant blue planet, asked the same question. Why? Ambassador Tella asked that question too. She found Captain Do-hyun in the observation deck of Station Orient 4, staring out at the stars. He looked tired. The campaign was taking its toll on him. He was not a young man anymore, and the weight of command pressed heavily on his shoulders. "Captain," Tella said, "may I speak with you?" Do-hyun turned and nodded. "Of course, Ambassador." Tella moved to stand beside him at the window. For a moment, they both looked out at the infinite darkness spotted with distant lights. "Your soldiers have freed 7 slave worlds in the past 2 weeks," Tella said. "They have treated the wounded, fed the hungry, comforted the suffering. They have done all of this while fighting a war against a vastly larger enemy." "That is correct. I do not understand." Tella turned to face him. "The Drekari are cruel because it serves their purpose. Cruelty keeps their subjects afraid and obedient. But kindness takes time. It takes resources. It makes your soldiers vulnerable. Why do you do it?" Do-hyun was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. "Ambassador, Do you know the history of my world? I know only what we have observed from a distance. For most of our history, humans have been cruel to each other. We have fought wars over land, over resources, over beliefs, over nothing at all. We have enslaved our own kind. We have committed acts of evil that I cannot even describe. He paused. But we have also always had people who fought against that evil. People who said that cruelty was wrong. People who risked everything to protect those who could not protect themselves. He turned to look at her with weary eyes. I fight the Drekari because they remind me of the worst parts of my own species. They are everything we could have become if we had let our cruelty win. I free their slaves because every person we rescue is proof that evil does not get the final word. It is proof that kindness can survive even in the darkest places. Tella listened in silence. She had lived for 300 years, but she felt like a child hearing wisdom for the first time. You fight like demons, she said slowly, but you heal like angels. You are the most confusing species I have ever encountered. For the first time in days, Doheen laughed. It was a tired laugh, but genuine. Ambassador, I assure you, we confuse ourselves most of the time. Far away, in the heart of the Drekari Empire, the High Council met in emergency session. The news from the front was catastrophic. 50 fleets had been destroyed. 40 conquered worlds had been liberated. Supply lines were cut. Communication was chaos. And the human ships just kept coming, appearing from nowhere, striking without warning, vanishing before counterattacks could be launched. The Emperor himself appeared before the Council. He was ancient, even by Drekari standards. His scales were almost white with age, and his eyes burned with cold fury. Find these humans, he commanded. Find their homeworld. Find their weakness. I do not care what it costs. I want them destroyed. The Council bowed in submission. But as they left the chamber, more than one of them wondered if destruction was even possible anymore. The humans had shown the galaxy something new. They had shown that the Drekari could be beaten. They had shown that tyranny was not invincible. And they had shown that somewhere, out among the endless stars, there were beings who would cross the universe to help strangers. The Drekari Empire, which had ruled through fear for 3,000 years, was beginning to crack, and the humans were only getting started. The war had lasted 8 months. 8 months of fire and blood and endless fighting. 8 months that had changed the galaxy forever. The Drekari Empire, which had stood unconquered for 3,000 years, was broken. Their fleets were scattered. Their conquered worlds were free. Their great war machine, which had crushed so many civilizations, lay in ruins across 100 star systems. And now their leaders came to surrender. Captain Park Do-hyun stood on the surface of a planet called Morth Prime. It had been a slave world once. Now it was free. The fields where prisoners had once worked themselves to death were empty. The labor camps had been torn down. In their place, the Morth people were slowly beginning to rebuild their lives. It was here, in the ruins of tyranny, that the Drekari had asked to negotiate. Do-hyun was not alone. Commander Yoon Jeon stood at his right side, her face calm but watchful. Admiral Cho Min-jae stood at his left, his arms crossed over his broad chest. Behind them, Sergeant Major Baek Soo-jin and a squad of Marines formed a silent wall of protection. Ambassador Tella was there too. She had insisted on attending. This moment, she said, belonged to all the species who had suffered under Drekari rule. The Velhari, the Morith, the Falani, the Dross. Representatives from each of them stood behind the humans, watching history unfold. A shuttle descended from the gray sky. It was a Drekari vessel, but it came without weapons and without escort. The surrender had been agreed. All that remained was to sign the terms. The shuttle landed. Its doors opened. 3 Drekari emerged. The one in front was old. His scales were white and his movements were slow. But his eyes still burned with pride, even in defeat. He wore the markings of an imperial envoy, the highest diplomatic rank in the Dreckery hierarchy. "I am Envoy Kress," he announced. His voice was cold. "I speak for the Dreckery High Council and the Emperor himself. We have come to discuss terms." Do-hyun nodded. "I am Captain Park Do-hyun. I speak for the United Nations Space Command and the Allied Liberation Forces. We are ready to hear what you have to say." Kress straightened his spine. Even in defeat, he tried to look down on those around him. "The Empire proposes a ceasefire. We will withdraw from Velhari space. We will recognize the independence of the species you have liberated." He spoke the word as if it tasted bitter. "In exchange, you will withdraw your forces from Dreckery territory. You will return the vessels and personnel you have captured, and you will provide guarantees that you will not continue your aggression." The silence that followed was heavy. Then Lieutenant Kang Yoonji stepped forward. She raised her datapad and projected a holographic image into the air between the two groups. It showed a star map with 12 blinking lights. "Envoy Kress," she said in a clear voice. "These are the locations of 12 additional human fleets. They departed from Earth 3 months ago. They are fully armed, fully supplied, and they will arrive in this sector within 2 weeks." Kress's old eyes widened slightly. "You asked about our demands," Do-hyun said. "Let me be clear. We are not here to negotiate a ceasefire. We are here to accept your unconditional surrender." "Unconditional?" Kress hissed. "You dare to demand unconditional surrender from the Dreckery Empire?" "I do." Do-hyun's voice was steady. "Here are our terms. First, you will immediately free all enslaved populations across every world under your control. Second, you will pay reparations to every species you have conquered. Third, you will submit to an oversight council made up of representatives from all affected peoples. And fourth, you will destroy your military infrastructure and rebuild your society on principles of peaceful coexistence." Kress stared at him with disbelief and hatred. "These are not terms. These are impossible demands. You ask us to destroy everything our empire has built. Your empire was built on slavery and murder," Commander Yoon said quietly. "Yes, we ask you to destroy it. And if we refuse?" Admiral Cho pointed at the sky. "Then we finish what we started. We have already destroyed the majority of your fleet. We have already freed 40 of your slave worlds. If you refuse to surrender, we will continue until there is nothing left of your empire but history books and warnings." Kress looked at the humans with something that might have been fear. Then he looked past them at the representatives of the freed species. The Morith, the Falani, the Dross, the Velhari, all of them watching, all of them waiting. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Kress lowered his head. "The Empire accepts your terms." There was no celebration, no cheering. The moment was too heavy for that. Centuries of suffering could not be erased by a single surrender. The wounds would take generations to heal. But it was over. The war was over. Later, as the sun set over Morth Prime, Ambassador Tella found Captain Do-hyun standing alone on a hillside. He was looking out at the horizon, where the first stars of evening were beginning to appear. "Captain," she said, walking up beside him. "May I join you?" He nodded without turning. For a while, they simply stood together in silence. The evening breeze was cool and gentle. Somewhere in the distance, a Morith child was laughing. It was the first time Tella had heard a Morith laugh. "I have been thinking," Tella finally said, "about the day I sent that message. The day I called for help." Do-hyun glanced at her. "What about it?" "I was so afraid." I thought I was sending a message into emptiness. I thought no one would answer. And even if they did answer, I never imagined. She spread her 4 hands, gesturing at everything around them. I never imagined this. Neither did I, Diane admitted. When I received your message, I did not know if we could win. I did not know if we would survive. I only knew that we had to try. Why? Tella asked. It was the same question she had asked months ago. But now it felt different, deeper. Do-hyun was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft and tired. Because someone should. Because when the darkness comes, someone should stand against it. Someone should reach out their hand and say you are not alone. I do not know if we are special. I do not know if we are chosen by some higher power. I only know that we heard you calling, and we came. That is what humans do. We answer the call. Tella felt tears forming in her eyes. After 300 years of life, she had thought herself past tears. She had been wrong. What will you do now? She asked. The war is over. Your people can go home. Some will, Do-hyun said. But many will stay. We have promises to keep. The freed species need help rebuilding. The Drekari need to be watched, and... He paused. And there is a whole galaxy out there that we have barely begun to explore. Who knows how many other signals are waiting in the void? How many other peoples are crying for help? Tella smiled through her tears. You will answer them too. If we can, always. 1 year later, a monument was built at Station Orin 4. It stood in the main plaza, where travelers from 100 species passed every day. The monument showed a human hand reaching down from the stars, and dozens of different hands reaching up to meet it. The inscription at the base was written in every language of the Alliance. It said, "We came as strangers. We left as family. Humanity remembers." Ambassador Tella attended the dedication ceremony. So did Commander Yoon Ji-an, now promoted to captain of her own vessel. So did Sergeant Major Baek Soo-jin, now training the first generation of Allied defense forces from a dozen different species. So did Corporal Nam Yuri, who had left the military to work as a healer on the recovering worlds. Captain Park Do-hyun was not there. He had returned to Earth for a much-needed rest. But he sent a message that was read aloud at the ceremony. To all the peoples of the Alliance, I say this. You do not owe us anything. We did not come for payment or praise. We came because it was right. We came because someone needed help, and we could provide it. That is not heroism. That is simply what any decent being should do. But I am proud of what we accomplished together. Not the battles. Not the victories. I am proud that when we were tested, we chose compassion over cruelty. We chose freedom over tyranny. We chose hope over despair. We showed the galaxy that darkness is not inevitable, that evil can be defeated, that light can win. The war is over, but our work is not finished. Across the stars, there are still those who suffer, still those who need help, still those who cry out in the darkness and wonder if anyone is listening. We are listening. We will always be listening. And when the call comes, humanity will answer. Today, tomorrow, forever. This is our promise. This is our way. And this is only the beginning. The message ended. The crowd was silent for a moment. Then, slowly, the applause began. It grew and grew until it echoed off the station walls and seemed to fill the entire void. The Valhari had expected peacekeepers. Humanity had sent something better. They had sent hope, armored in steel, armed with fury, and tempered with love. They had sent the promise that no one would ever face the darkness alone again. And across the galaxy, in every language and every heart, that promise was remembered. Humanity was here. Humanity cared. And humanity would fight for those who could not fight for themselves. Always.